So propaganda is a really important topic because it does impact all of our lives pretty much all the time. Now, what propaganda is what we're going to get into. There is a popular understanding of what it is, but sometimes it's often too broad. Sometimes it's often too narrow too, because you may not understand the wide-ranging uses that propaganda could actually serve for you and against you. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the really interesting advertising that many of you have seen, especially if you're older. I pulled some stuff from my archives. I've been collecting some of this stuff for a couple of decades now. We're going to talk about military propaganda. We're going to watch some commercials, and I'm going to show you some posters that are old. And then please, as I'm going through some of this stuff, jot down some of your ideas of things that you've seen that may have been effective or ineffective, or if you just have any questions, save them to the end so that we can go through those together. I do have a lot of slides, but I'm going to try to get through this stuff in a timely fashion. The goal here is to make you less vulnerable to propaganda. You can't be invincible to it because we have biases. There's going to be reasons why you may want to agree with the propaganda. Propaganda could also be true. Just because something is persuading you doesn't mean it's evil. Right? You can persuade someone to want to take care of themselves. That would be persuasion in a productive method. You could persuade someone to endorse the non-aggression principle. Right? That would be a way that libertarians would use propaganda to persuade someone to stop aggressing against somebody else. Just because something's propagandistic, all that means is that it's persuasion to try to educate you in the direction that someone is trying to lead you. Doesn't mean it's bad. Let's see. All right. So let's get into this. I have a few books that I pulled this information from. And Edward Bernays is a really influential person in history. You may have heard the name. Have you heard his name before? Let me see. Can I see some hands? Awesome. Yeah. Bernays bridged the gap between persuasion of the public relations, and advertising. Okay, so there's a blurred line at a certain point where propaganda and advertising meet in the middle somewhere. You know, advertising is when you're trying to sell a product. Sometimes it could be a lifestyle brand, a clothing brand. It's not always necessarily like a soda or something like that. It can be a broad array of things. You can also be trying to persuade someone to support a policy. All right, now that's not advertising, that's more public relations and propaganda. But there's a huge swath of gray area in between. Where propaganda and advertising meet in a really interesting fusion is when you start to add art to your propaganda messaging, which we're going to get into later. And we're going to show what a powerful tool art is as a propaganda tool. So Edward Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and in his work there's an enormous amount of psychological analysis and manipulation as well. When you understand the psychology of the person to whom you're trying to persuade, you can really start to touch some of the pain points with which they are reacting emotionally. If you can persuade them over in this emotional way by hitting those triggers, then they're much more likely to react in the way that you want them to react. And what you're trying to do is to get them to go in a certain direction towards a certain goal. Right? You want them to choose the solution which you're already offering. So the guy, he's lived 1891, 1995, unbelievable, he's 103 years old. I can't take the claim for the most handsome propagandist, as you can see from his photo here. He's also known as the father of modern public relations. And he was so influential. You're going to see some quotes from his books that show where we are today. And his book, Propaganda, which was written in 1928. You're going to see some really evident quotes from his book that you can see in action today. And I think that there's actually something really interesting about where we are today in public relations, propaganda, and advertising, because I don't think that people actually study the craft anymore. You know, I love the show Mad Men, and if you watch that show, you can see behind the scenes and how they kind of do market research and they think about it, why people react to certain things, and they make certain claims about products because they know that that's going to get someone to be more interested and more empathetic toward a certain view or want to purchase a product in the end. And Edward Bernays really kind of pioneered that view of things. Just to show how, and actually I didn't finish my point there. I do that a lot. I get really excited about something and I start to like tail end one thought into another. Anyway, so the influence, I think, is absorbed in culture today. So I think that a lot of the modern advertising that you see, they come out of graphic design school, they study some advertising, they may study some old advertising, but I think that a lot of the techniques are just in the air, that we just sort of absorb them. And I think sort of similar to, here's another book, Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. This is necessary reading for anyone who really wants to understand our cultural moment. The rules that are in this book are actually really pragmatic. I agree with a lot of what he says. When he's talking about being a pragmatist to work within the system in which you live, does anyone find fault with that as a way to be a messenger? You have to be able to reach people where they are. So he's effective. Saul Alinsky is just effective. That's just all it is. You can have disagreements in his policy views on things, but the way that he empathizes with the people he's trying to reach is just accurate. And I think that a lot of the things have been done so many times that you end up seeing derivatives as the generations go on. And you start to see fifth and sixth generation propaganda and people growing up being propagandized and advertised too. And they just naturally sort of absorb these tactics. I don't even think people study this stuff anymore. I don't think that they go to the direct source and understand what they're doing. They just naturally do it. And it could be because when you grow up in a society where you're being propagandized to, you just become a sociopath. It could be true. Like I think that you have to be a little bit of a sociopath to be able to want to be a public relations director, to be someone who is a campaign director who will write ads for a candidate who they know is not serious, who they know is actually not there for the best interest of the people. There has to be something just a little bit wrong and perhaps evil to be able to put all of your morals aside and be able to write something that you know is going to do damage to people, but you don't care, right? Yeah. So just as an example of how influential he was, the book Propaganda, which is right here, was written in 1928. And in the book, and near the end of the book, he writes that the presidential candidate or the high office seeker, so U.S. senator, president, governors, need to be talented propagandists in their own way. They have to be able to persuade people by getting on the stump and leading the group of the room or special interest groups to follow them toward the goal that they want them to go to. You have to be a talented personality. Like, who do we know recently who has been a talented personality and been able to get up on the stump and then just rally a room towards something that they want? Trump is one, and I think Obama is another, who's an extremely talented politician who was able to get up there and speak and be able to persuade people there toward the goal that he wants them to go. And there's going to be some techniques we're going to touch on here that is going to, in your mind, invoke certain people at certain times. And I'm interested to hear how you all react to them. So here's a quote, page 48 in Propaganda. He says, "I am aware that the word propaganda carries to many minds an unpleasant connotation." That's true. Does anyone have a positive connotation with the word propaganda? I didn't think it would be. Pretty obviously, no. Whenever you talk about something that's on the news or a headline from the New York Times or Washington Post or whatever, you're thinking, oh, this is propaganda. I'm being propagandized to here. I'm being manipulated. You'll see the shares on social media all the time, the memes about the terrible headlines where they're excusing something that's quite obviously wrong or incorrect. The corrective headlines that come afterwards don't actually apologize for the mistake that was made. Instead, they highlight the thing that should make them morally correct. Right? They're more interested in being morally correct than they are with being factually correct. That's an AOC, not a direct quote. She did say something around that when she was talking about economic numbers. It was about 2 years ago. He says, more important to be morally correct than factually correct. It feels. Yeah, it's about the feels. So Bernays did not think that the word itself was bad. He said there's no judgment on it. It's just a function of the goals and the time in which you live. So he was really just interested in how do we persuade people in the most effective way possible. That's all he was interested in doing. And there's a quote from the book also. He says, neither good nor bad, but custom makes them so. All right, so the propaganda itself isn't bad. It's just how you use it. One of the first jobs that he had was he was on the Committee on Public Information. And he coined the phrase psychological warfare. And the CPI, as it was called, was in action from 1917 to 1990. And it was under the Woodrow Wilson administration. It was created to influence support for World War I. He also was pretty critical on the United Fruit Company's campaign to overthrow the government in Guatemala. Some of you may have heard about that. The United States had an overthrow of the Guatemalan government because they decided that they wanted to take control of the fruit plantations and that they didn't want to have exceedingly favorable export rules for the United Fruit Company. So they went ahead and just overthrew the government, because that's what you do when you don't get an agreement, right? You just murder the people who don't agree with you. So here's some of the work that Edward Bernays worked on. So the Committee on Public Information, they created this poster, which in it is a lot of interesting information just merely in this one little banner. So for one, it's called the Liberty Loan Pictorial News. All right. So this is clearly an advertisement to get people to buy U.S. bonds to support the war. But they use the word news right in the headline, right? So if you're watching this, you're thinking this is a news report, but it's actually just an advertisement. So it's almost like in the New York Times or the Washington Post when you have those advertorial pages, right? When you have a guest writer who writes something, but they paid to have that page printed, right? It's in a newspaper, and it's printed exactly in the same way that any one of their editorials would be printed and presented, with the same letterhead, the same graphic design, the same layout, right? And it leads the viewer to read this as if it were endorsed by the paper as news, when in fact what it is an advertisement. So this technique is extremely old. Now, let's actually read this. So it said, because I don't think you can see it from there. It says, first aid in the front lines. In the Lorraine trenches, this American soldier has been overcome by German poison gas. The American Hospital Corps are doing their best, quickly and skillfully, to lighten his suffering. Liberty bonds furnish gas masks, bandages, medicine, and drugs that relieve pain. Buy all the bonds you can. Liberty bonds save lives. Now, there's a lot of key things that are going on here. For one, the advertisements it's to sell bonds under the news banner, as I said. The soldiers are depicted as victims of German aggression, right? These guys are suffering on the front lines to protect you from the Germans, and they're getting gassed. And this poor guy, who could be any one of your sons or dads or brothers or uncles or nephews, is lying there having been gassed by the Huns, okay? The guilt complex that's used here to get people to buy the bonds to keep the war going, because without the money, the voluntary spending of buying the bonds, the war has to stop. Now, I mean, I don't know how much studying on Woodrow Wilson and World War I all of you have done, but there is a great case to be made that absent Woodrow Wilson's intervention in World War I, it would have just ended in a stalemate, and we may never have had the Nazi regime and World War II following, right? So there's a great case to be made there. I'm not endorsing any cases from this podium at this time for this function. Talk to Josh. So funding the war to keep it going is really what's most important here. Now, all right, next thing. The caption tells a story, because without the caption, would we know what was going on here? Absolutely not. This could have been anyone. This could have been a civilian. It could have been an enemy combatant that they rescued or saved. This could be friendly fire. It could be an accident. This could also be a training drill. How do we know that this person's actually injured? We don't. The guys are all standing around. They're all wearing first aid banners. Is this not just a training drill in which they're trying to understand how to wrap somebody and administer aid? Did they really get a photo from the front line? I don't know. I don't believe them, frankly. So the caption tells the story, not the actual photo. Where have we seen that before? Does anyone remember the border whipping of the Haitian migrants? Yeah, we do, unfortunately. Didn't happen that long ago. The caption came out right away, and unfortunately, this got me for a day. I fell victim to the caption game, where they said that the border agents were whipping Haitian migrants with their reins on their horses. It took only about 2 days for other angles and video to come out to show that didn't happen. That wasn't true. So they wasted time on investigations. They paid for money for an investigation to take place. They ruined the life of the border agent whose crime really was, well, working for the Border Patrol. And second, being unlucky enough to be sent to the scene of this event. If he wasn't sent there, this wouldn't have happened to him. And whipping his horse, right, because that's actually what was going on. He was using the reins to guide the horse. It's, So afterward, Politico, hot on the scene, they were one of the first, and now this is funny because when I went to go try to find the original headlines condemning everybody, border agent seen whipping migrant, I can't find them. I can't find the headlines that actually were the first ones. I can find the tepid admissions where they say, he didn't whip migrants, but he used force and inappropriate language. He was mean. So what happened here was that they kicked public relations into high gear in order to save their reputation. The most important thing for them is to salvage a mistake, a dumpster fire, when they are leaping in to condemn somebody and create the awful first initial reaction. The first initial reaction is the one that people mostly remember. They don't ever remember the apology. And the longer you can postpone the apology, the more the initial reaction stays in people's hearts and minds. So they save the reputation after the dramatic interpretation. They emphasize he was mean, but we were still right. And it's not a retraction, it's more of a redirection. So another quote, page 55, touch a nerve at a sensitive spot and you get an automatic response. So you can think of a lot of different ways that this is used all the time. Emotional responses are incredibly valuable in public relations, in advertising, and all different kinds of methods of communication and persuasion. If you can find the thing that the person is most emotionally connected to, then you can easily find the way to persuade them to support your cause. Like, for example, I was thinking about this one a little while ago. I was thinking that if conservatives wanted to play the same game that the left uses when it comes to abortion as healthcare, for example, they would take a advertising campaign similar to World War II with Rosie the Riveter and say, we're going to celebrate female strength in the factories because without them in the factories here, the men on the front line would be sitting ducks. They wouldn't be able to fight. Right? So the women are actually the strength of the men. Now that's a great way to motivate people to get into a situation in which they're helping you do a thing and they feel moral and just for doing it. Right? So the reward is actually them feeling good about themselves. So in the conservative argument against the left, if they were to say, come up with a slogan, and I came up with this, and I don't know if it's actually good or not, but if they said that every child deserves a home and every home deserves a child, and then they venerated the mothers and said, this creation of life is sacred, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that children get adopted, and you're doing your part to create the next generation of intelligent, hardworking Americans leading us into the next generation. Maybe you could actually be able to say, instead of making pregnant mothers or single pregnant mothers feel bad about themselves, that actually feel good that they're giving a child to a home that is going to love it and take care of it. So, I mean, that needs work, but it's sort of the idea of if the thing that you want is the children to be born and to be adopted, then you make the people who are doing the thing feel good about what they're doing. So, when it comes to touching the sensitive spot, Just replay the last, or don't, because you have PTSD about it, the last 6 years of media coverage of the Trump presidency, school shootings, gaslighting, which became a popular phrase, making you think something that isn't true, or making you think that you're actually the bad person. Right? I'm actually a racist. I didn't realize it. Like I didn't know this. I'm glad you told me. So now I can take the corrective measures. And then I can put up posters all over my house and the sidewalk and make everybody who walks by think I'm a good person, right? The truth is that it's never what it looks like. The emotional manipulation is merely just a tactic. It's just a weapon that they have against you. They're using your empathy and your sympathies and emotional response against you. So the guilt response is really their biggest weapon. And they use it all the time, and I think that they've overplayed it, because it's getting to the point where if you make someone feel guilty so much, at a certain point, they actually have the opposite reaction toward you, and they just blow it in your face. They're like, fine, I'm a bad person, and they'll just own it. They'll lean into it now, because they believe it about themselves at that point. All right? So Covington Catholic, and then going back in time, Duke lacrosse. Similar cases in which it was some douchey, smiley white kid who, Duke lacrosse was kind of like the quintessential one. It was like everybody can get behind hating some prep school lacrosse players, because who didn't hate the lacrosse team in high school? So it's like an easy one. You just put them up there, look at these guys. Of course they did it. Of course they did it. Yeah. But then it turns out they didn't. So now who's the asshole? Unfortunately, sometimes the people you think did the thing didn't do it. And now you're the bad person because you foisted it on them. So there's immediate hatred of a villain with no caution whatsoever. There is not 1 minute where they said, maybe this isn't what it appears to be. Because in the case of Covington Catholic, it took a day before the unedited video was out. We couldn't have just waited a few minutes just to be like, well, can we see what happened before that moment? No, they leapt into it. And when they saw the other video, they leaned even harder to say, no, it is what we said it is. Trust me. Because look at him. Look at the smile. What else do you need? So the media inserts into our minds the character which you're supposed to hate. And Nicholas Salmon's face was merely just a paper mask to put on your enemy. And of course, he's wearing the stupid hat, so it's easy, right? And there's been many other such cases in which people you can easily, go ahead, write down, you're the one that's coming to your mind right now and tell me later, that they just inserted the story onto the thing which you're supposed to hate. And it's not that guy you're supposed to hate. You're supposed to hate what he represents. No one really cares about him. The Washington Post didn't care about Nicholas Salmon. They cared about what they were making him represent. They were making him a mascot for a movement which was full of jerks. That's all it was. And they were so ready to move on as soon as they had the next punching bag. So all you need to do is just push it out until the next thing happens, and you kick it to the curb, you're done with it, move on to the next issue. And don't ever look back, except for when you have to pay a probably whole $100 million lawsuit settlement for defamation. So you can think of school shootings, COVID coverage, immigration, education funding. All of these things are used to touch an empathetic nerve response and make you think about something that is close to you, so that you can insert in your mind, oh, that's my mom who is being threatened. That's my niece who is, they get food stamps. And I hear that these, white Republicans want to take that away. And, my sister really needs that. So you're now thinking about the person who's close to you. You're not thinking about the generic issue. You're thinking about an emotionally close connection you have. And that's why they're constantly trying to push actual people in front of you, even if that person is not what they claim it is. It's just a stand-in. They don't need it to be accurate. Let's watch a commercial. Siren for emphasis at the most manipulative part. Yeah. God, they care so goddamn much about you. All right. Beautifully shot. Like, it looks like it's from a movie. They spared no expense with these ads. It's fucking evil. It's just evil. It's manipulative, it's evil, and it's touching you in a nerve spot, a nerve response, where people lose the ability to even think rationally about it. Now, obviously, this, we're all autistic here, so this won't be relevant for you. However, typical women have this emotional heartstring reaction where they're like, okay, there's two women in the commercial. It's her and her mother, right? And they're obviously making you think, my mom is old. She's frail. My grandma or whoever it is. They're making you think that there's no names used, right? It's very generic and general. They're keeping it easy, a blank slate, so that you can pour it yourself into that commercial. And they don't even have to tell you who's responsible for this because they're telling you they can fix it. All right, so we know Trump did this. That's basically all you have to say. It's just like, you want out of this? This sucks. Your mom's probably going to die, and you can't see her. You can't visit her. You have to put your hand on the glass and feel her body warmth through the glass. That's it. And, other than that, your mom's going to die. So, vote for Biden-Harris. So they're just capitalizing on your frustration. Like, no one wants to be locked in their goddamn house. Right? So you're just showing people literally shut in, and we can fix this. So this sucks. It hurts. Right? That's all it is. All right, so I pulled these out of my archives. These are probably from about 2008. I don't know exactly what year these were. They're very low resolution because it was a long time ago. And now, when I saw the Biden-Harris ad, it made me think of this one. And I wanted to show you, again, people who grow up under manipulation grow up to produce manipulation. All right, so it's like children who are abused grow up to abuse children, right?
It's difficult. I don't want to be sitting here telling you about how my 5-year-old son passed away from the flu. He had just lost a tooth too, so he's proud of that. I think it's something that you never think will happen. You hope it never happens. And then when it does, it's devastating.
Ugh is the right response. So they've been doing this a long time. There's no depths to which they won't sink. And they have a playbook that they go through all the pages. And then when they get to the end, they turn it over and they go back to page 1. There's no new chapters being written. It's the same crap over and over again. If you go back to the 70s, they had ads for the swine flu, which were very similar. There's one, I just think of it now. Actually, I forgot to pull it out. It shows a couple of guys at social events, one's playing basketball, and he's then the next scene he's in bed with the fever and just sweat pouring off of him, and it's oh, I went out and had fun and I engaged with people in public, and now I have the swine flu because I'm an asshole. Now, these ads were so goddamn good that they made a series of them.
I remember coming into the house only because I knew we had to tell our daughter Emma that her brother wasn't coming home. So that's another tough thing, is you just left one of your children at the hospital and you have to come home and tell your other child this horrible, horrible news that you know is going to change your lives forever.
Yeah, it's awful. So let me back up here. I want to show you something. That photo is fake. And I can tell you with 100% certainty. I gotta pause this. Hang on. Because I'm gonna show you. Hold on. Crap.
I remember coming
This is
into
awkward.
the house only because I knew.
All right. All right. When I pause here, it's hard to see. Can I zoom this? No, I can't zoom it. The heads are way too big, way too big. The head is, and this head are from two separate photos. That's another photo, and they're composited together. But it's a background shot, and back in those days, many people didn't have HD TVs yet. So you're watching this on a low resolution screen, and most people won't even see it. And they were just like, no one will see it. I saw it. It's so obviously not a real photo. So that's not her son. Emma's not her daughter. She didn't have to come home and tell her that her son was dead. And that's a horrible thing to joke about, but it's not true, so it's funny.
Well, even though Joseph's been gone 18
Is this the same one? No,
made the
it's a new one.
decision to keep all his things as they were when he was here last. I finally just packed his toothbrush away like 6 months ago. It had been sitting on the counter in the bathroom. And I was cleaning the bathroom one day and I just thought, okay, it's time to put the toothbrush in the medicine cabinet.
I mean, how awful is it to ape on people who have lost children, right? Is that not one of the most evil things that you can do? You're going to capitalize on the pain that people have felt and experienced, and they know someone whose child had died. You're going to capitalize on that and create a fake ad with someone who's an actress. So get your kids their flu shots. All right, so when Edward Bernays worked in the Committee on Public Information, this is a quote from Propaganda. He said, "There was one basic lesson I learned in the CPI, that efforts comparable to those applied by the CPI to affect the attitudes of the enemy, of neutrals, and people of this country could be applied with equal facility to peacetime pursuits. In other words, what could be done for a nation at war could be done for organization and peoples in a nation at peace." So he's talking about advertising. He's talking about just domestic policy, not necessarily fluffing up a war and getting people to support it. So as I mentioned before, Father Public Relations, I already talked about a lot of this stuff. The book Propaganda, by the way, was more of a advertising pamphlet for himself. Like, it really isn't about, like, here's how you do it. It's really about, like, here, I'm so smart, hire me. So that's one of the reasons why it's such a short book, and why he's so, like, forthcoming with information. It's not like an educational book. And it reads really fast. Like, if you're interested in the topic, like, you can zoom through this book really fast. Unless you're like me and you have to go back and reread it and, like, highlight everything. So this is one of his first major PR stunts out of government. It was the Torches of Freedom, in which he brought smoking to women because he loves gender equality. So they had basically maxed out their sales base. They're like, we can't sell any more cigarettes. You know, this is as far as we can go with it. Who else can we get who isn't smoking other than young children? And they're like, well, women can't smoke because there is a social, I don't know, what? Taboo, I guess, yeah, social taboo about women and smoking cigarettes. It was dirty. It's not feminine. You know, it was also like a phallic thing as well. So he went and he got a bunch of women who were like socialites to march in the Easter parade smoking cigarettes. I don't know how many smoking cigarettes they had to do during the whole Easter parade. It's probably like 2 packs by the time they got to the end of it. But you can see, like, he telegrammed well-known socialites all across the country and said, we'd like you to speak on behalf of this. You know, if the topic comes up, you know, say that, like, you're in favor of women equality and women power, and, you know, that women should be able to do this sort of thing without being shunned, right? Men shouldn't say, like, she's not dateable or something because she smokes cigarettes. So an ancient prejudice has been removed. Women are free. So American intelligence is what's on the collar of the cuff, and there's a breaking chain. So Lucky Strike, they're toasted, by the way, and they had ads that would say, like, you know, we have waxed filters so it doesn't mess up your lipstick. They also had the one on the left. Her singing coach advised a light smoke. I also really like I smoke a Lucky instead of eating sweets. There's other ones where it says, like, you know, I keep my figure slim by skipping a sweet and choosing a cigarette. You know, fast forward to the 1980s and you have models who don't do anything but smoke cigarettes, and it does work. It actually does keep you thin. Yeah. And then, so now you have derivatives where the other companies come out and say, oh, this works. You know, this works. Lucky Strike's sales skyrocketed. And again, Mad Men, Lucky Strike is the brand that's featured in the show, right? Because they're so groundbreaking with a lot of their advertising. So Marlboro, they pick it up and See how delightfully different Marlboro's truly choice tobacco tastes, and it's got a woman smoking a cigarette. And then my favorite of all time, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. That's why, oh my God. So who's in the ad and who's the customer? The doctor's in the ad, but the doctor's not the customer. We don't care how many doctors smoke cigarettes, but everybody has a doctor. Everybody trusts their doctor. So, most people trust their doctors. Okay, I forgot what room we're in. So who's in the ad? Women. Women trust other women, right? So if a woman says, oh, you can smoke a cigarette, they're great. All right, women trust women. And then everybody has a doctor, and so they trust your doctor. So those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. Now, Bernays had a very pessimistic view of society and of the public. And in many of the pages, he refers to the public as basically just like this manipulated blob. He does specifically divide people amongst their special interest groups, gender, ages, religions. He talks about how wide and diverse, and he says they're not an amorphous blob. Very specifically, he says that. But also at the same time, refers to each of those groups as a way to just corral opinion, take those people and turn them around to do your bidding. So if you have a special interest, a bill, a law, something you're trying to get pushed forward, public policy, you get the influencers in each of those groups to speak to their people and manipulate them for you. So if you're able to get them, the influencers, and I think where does that word used today? We hear it on social media all the time, YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. Those influencers are extremely useful. And he refers specifically to heads of, this is 1928, so he's like, your local knitting club or whatever it is. If what you're trying to do is get people to buy a certain kind of material, like velvet or something like that for your dresses, then you get the person who is influential in that category to tell people this is accepted, this is beautiful, this is stylish. So today we have an even more segmented society with all of the different news outlets, Mother Jones, Politico, Vox, any number of, pick your favorite crappy YouTube channel. And they will employ the types of influencers in the area to influence the people that they're trying to reach. So if it's an early 20-something female group, to manipulate them to do something, you find the influencer who's got some kind of weight or pull or is the right kind of look or appearance, and they will listen to that person. That's why during the pandemic, all you heard was epidemiologists and doctors and pediatricians and whatever. Like, it was repeated over and over again. Even if you could find another epidemiologist who disagreed, it didn't matter, forget them. This is the one that we want to listen to. So Edward Bernays was actually the first shit poster, and he said, instead of a mind, universal literacy has given man rubber stamps inked with advertising slogans and platitudes. Each man's rubber stamps are duplicates of millions of others. That's an abbreviated quote. The long one is much longer. So you've seen the NPC meme, I assume, right? And this is exactly what it means. It means you were just a duplicate. You don't have a brain. You get a download of the latest program, comes into your mind. Okay, now I have the most recent information. I can then go out and I can parrot the information. It's a rubber stamp. He even talks about, and he's such a great foresight for what our society was going to become, because he talked about how information could be disseminated instantly across the country. And it's 1928. No, it really couldn't by today's standards. You can text it out, you can tweet it out. It's all over the papers within a minute of it happening if it's a big enough story. He was talking about instantaneous being the printing press and the radio. That still takes some time. So you can think about slogans like "My mask protects you," right? Does it make any sense? Is it true? No, but people said it. And they said it with fervor, with zest, right? Did anyone say platitudes? So, we see these all over Denver, so I don't need to make a comment. The manipulators of public opinion made use of the mental cliches and the emotional habits of the public to produce mass reactions against the alleged atrocities, the terror, and the tyranny of the enemy. Now we're talking about war propaganda. If you're going to get people excited about a war, you have to make them afraid of the war. You have to make them afraid of the people who you are fighting against. So some World War I posters, which are, as an artist, I think they're beautiful in the way that they're done, but they are very like quintessentially manipulative and evil. So the left, keep the Hun out, buy home protection with war saving stamps. So home protection, like the German soldiers coming through your window with a bloody bayonet and fires in the background because he's clearly set fire to your neighbor's house and you're next. Destroy the mad brute, enlist. And that, in the image, this is America in the water. So that's literally America's shores. Okay, so we're trying to keep the Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany from coming to America. Was that ever really a threat? I don't think so. It was. No, shut up. And the middle one, buy U.S. government bonds, third Liberty loan. On the top, it says halt the Hun. And it's got this brave American soldier, he's tall, chiseled chin up in the air, with a sword, because they use swords. And the Hun, the German, with the bayonet, a woman and a baby. All right. So again, I said, outside of this room, women have this normal emotional response. They want to protect their babies. They envision other people with babies if they're young. They want to have babies, they think, and so you have to protect your children, your future children, your family's children, so on and so forth, your neighbor's children. So if you want to manipulate people, you make them see kids, right? So does anyone remember this person? Yeah, we do. So this was Nurse Naraya, and she was a witness in in Kuwait. She was allegedly a nurse, and she saw with her own eyes Iraqi soldiers kicking over incubators, babies in incubators, right? So the babies in incubators meme we've heard over and over and over and over again. It turned out she's actually the daughter of a Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. She wasn't a nurse. She didn't see anything. And it didn't happen. So it's complete manipulation, complete facade, a manufactured story to get a war to be popular. Similarly, when have we seen this recently? So there's a lot of the photos. I didn't want to use the close-up one of the child because I think it's gross. But that the Syrian boy washed up on the shores of Turkey because of a vessel that was way overloaded, unsafely overloaded by the smuggler who was paid to bring them from Turkey to Europe. They were already in a refugee camp, all right? Now, the refugee camps are not great. That's not the point. The point is that the story was made that they were escaping a war directly. They boarded a boat in order to save their lives to get to Europe because it was the only safe place that they could go. That was used to get people excited, amped up, and pushing for a war. British politicians tell David Cameron, when dead children are being washed up on our beaches, it's time to act. I don't know what that means. Is it just bring them all to Britain? Is it get in the war? It doesn't matter. That's not the point. Just you're getting people pissed off. When you don't have a solution or a direct actual call to action that you're trying to make, all you're trying to do is just cause trouble. You're just trying to make people angry. Whatever happens, doesn't matter. We're just pissed. And then now we can use this kind of latent anger against the ruling regime so that when we come up against them in elections again, we'll have more fodder to be able to pull from. Again, same war, same tactic, different child. A political practice which has its roots in the tendency of the popular leader to follow more often than he leads is the technique of the trial balloon from page 125, propaganda. Trial balloons are the technique of taking an idea, putting it out in the press, seeing what the reaction is, gauging the response, watching the polls, letting the data come back to you, and then making your decision based on that. Trump did it all the time. He got up in his speeches. How many times do you say, what should we do? Should we build a wall? You want to build a wall? We'll build a wall, okay. All right, because everybody claps and they're all into build the wall, build the wall. All right, okay, we'll build the wall. I'm just giving you what you want. So Obama did this as well, but he was way slicker about it. Do we want to get into a war? Show him a kid covered in ash, looking bewildered. Show him a baby on a shore. See what happens. There was a lot of call to intervene. There was a lot of call to intervene in the Syrian war. ISIS, the Yazidis, right? Whatever happened to the Yazidis. I haven't heard of a Yazidi in several years. Does it matter? Like, do we care anymore? Are they good? I don't know. So the origin of the chemical weapons in this actually turned out to likely not be a government source. It actually probably, likely, was perpetrated by ISIS, the Syrian, not ISIS, it was the Syrian opposition groups, because the U.S. government had said we're about to pull out. Boom, you get a chemical weapon attack. Okay, now we're staying. But the people asked for it when it happens. So I'm only giving you what you asked for. But they immediately declared that it was a Syrian government airstrike without any evidence of the case. Also on page 125, the whole basis of successful propaganda is to have an objective and then to endeavor to arrive at it through an exact knowledge of the public and modifying circumstances to manipulate and sway that public. Where have we seen that? Anthrax, mobile weapon labs. Colin Powell at the UN talked about sarin gas from a non-existent mobile chemical weapons lab. Completely manufactured, completely made up, bad intel. Was not true. But he went in front of the United Nations with vials of alleged sarin that he said existed. The decision had already been made to go to war. The decision to invade had already been made. General Wesley Clark talked about the plans that he went and he saw the plan to invade 7 countries in 9 years or whatever the number was. And, they were just trying to create the legality, the legitimacy via the demand from the public. The political action can't take place until there's a demand for it. All right, here's an unsuccessful one, but a majorly successful advertising campaign, which involved influencers from all over the place. Does anyone remember Coney 2012? Yeah, get Coney, right? It had 100 million views in 6 days. It was a group called Invisible Children, I think they were called. And they created the Coney 2012 program to make him infamous. And, it was kind of a goof on the election coming up. We're going to make him, elect him for president. In Coney 2012 says one thing we can all agree on, right? So everybody agrees on this. If you don't agree, you're a bad person. All right, we've already established that. And if you don't like children, you're evil, because children are the ones who were the soldiers in the army. This is a really interesting campaign. I never got to the bottom of how it actually got circulated so widely, but it got put in front of some really, really majorly popular influencers. Oprah, Taylor Swift. There was a number of other people. And they got it to 100 million views in 6 days. Like, that is the unbelievable view count in a really short time. The project was in work for years, right? The project was, I looked it up, it was being developed for years. It's not something you can just push out in a weekend. Despite their best efforts, they actually suck at this. So when you see government propaganda put out with videos and stuff, it's usually not of a high quality. And it's usually very ineffective. Perfect example, Kamala Harris sitting on the front porch of the vice presidential house talking to those kids about them wanting to go to space. Remember that? It was like, who wants to go to space? And she's talking about their dreams and stuff. And it made absolutely no sense. She's talking to them like they're 5-year-olds. And you're like, this looks like it was shot for a high school project. This is ridiculous. It wasn't influential at all. It's not well done. Partially the fact that the speaker in the video is an idiot, and she's not magnetic or effective in any way. So, Edward Bernays talks about if you have someone who's of a average intellect and mentality, they may as well not get involved in politics. So, what was actually behind this? Why did the government at that time want this pushed so hard? Could it have been something ulterior, like some mineral deposits or something else going on in Uganda? China rejects allegations that may grab Ugandan airport if country defaults on loan. They loaned a huge amount of money, and at that same time, they actually found one of the largest gold deposits on the planet, possibly one of the largest gold deposits have ever been found. All right, possibly as much gold as has ever been excavated. So China rolls right in, and maybe it was about Chinese influence developing in the region. So they loaned them a huge amount of money. Uganda defaults on the loan, and they say, we're not taking the airport. That's on November 29th of last year, and only a few months later, they take over the airport. So they basically said, like, you're going to put all the money in a joint account, which we control. That was their way of getting paid back. All right, so this is a technique I named myself. It's called the megaphone. And I think it's when many voices are joined, and this is why you always see those like Twitter the tweets where they're like all basically carbon copies of one another. You ever seen those? All right, people are blasting it out from all many different sources so that you can join the credibility of the crowd. Big propaganda, often created by joining forces. So, you know, on CNN, you have a panel of 7 people. Every one of them agrees. Why do we have 7? Doesn't matter. We could do this with 2. They're all saying the same thing. Doesn't matter. But we're manufacturing a group consensus here by saying, look how many people agree. It's the same thing as saying, like, you know, the 50 intelligence agencies that endorsed the Russian hacking campaign. Do we need 50? Like, can't 2 do it? Like, they're all carbon copies of each other anyway. It doesn't matter. Or X number of doctors agree on a certain, you know, vaccine strategy or treatment or whatever it is. So he says larger industries have sought to overcome the difficulty of advertising by cooperative advertising, in which associations of industries compete with other associations. So basically what you're trying to do is you're going to create an association between people who already are of like mind so you can defeat a larger opponent. So you're going to have, like, you know, friendly advertising that you don't target one of your competitors, but you will target the one who's the outlier who you both need to make sure is put out of the game. Now, I'm not going to say the New York Post is good or Fox News is good, but I think it kind of goes without saying that they are of a smaller number of outlets than the other ones. And now Fox News probably has a higher view count and ratings in the prime time and all that stuff. That's not really the point. The point is that you have 90 others who join their voices together to give consensus. Because you can switch between CNN, MSNBC, and any of the online outlets and get the same voice. And if you are, how could they all be wrong? The Hunter Biden story was censored during the election. Social media turned out to be true. The Russian collusion ended up being a complete hoax, and it had congressional hearings, multi-year Robert Mueller investigations. I also love when Rachel Maddow nicknamed Robert Mueller Bob Mueller, like they were on a first-name nickname basis. Do you remember that? Bob Mueller is on the case. So it's just to humanize him, make him someone who is like your neighbor. Oh, Bob's going to do it. Bob's smart. So a vast number of networks, magazines, newspapers, radio lean left, hard left, that the voices create consensus thinking among the public. All right, let's talk about some effective versus ineffective. And let's watch some more commercials. These are good.
The call to serve. It has no sound, yet I have heard it. And it was written retelling of honorable sacrifices made by those who have served before me. The call to serve has no form, yet I have clearly seen it. In the eyes of men and women, infinitely more courageous and more driven than most. The call to serve has no weight, yet I have held it in my hands. I will commit to carry it close to my heart until my country is safe and the anguish of those less fortunate has been soothed.
Public service at home and away.
Always present. And for those who choose to answer the call,
Diversity, but it's not forced. No, honestly, I think it's great. You could watch this and not see diversity. You just see people. You see Americans.
America's Navy,
A global force for good. Can you argue with that? It's global. We like the globe. We live there. It's a force. It's strong. I want to be strong. And it's good. Okay, cool. It's a great slogan. Again, the Navy needs to get shit done. They need people who can work together. So they're not going to force the diversity. It's in there. But they're mostly focused on people who can get stuff accomplished. Teamwork. Connecting it to home. Foreign service connecting it to home. So these are from a while ago. These are from like 2011 or so. So far I'm showing you effective ads. None of them so far are showing you enemies or making you feel afraid. They're all about service, duty, honor, home and abroad, and being people who we know in the community, heroes that we know, our coaches, our mom, our dad, right, our friend, our mentor. See the words that are used? Everything is a positive association. Everything is about enlisting to give of yourself, whether you think it's BS or not, beside the point, it's effective. And they're mostly focused on getting people who are team players. This is a great ad too. So U.S. Marine locks eyes, circles around. Damn, that guy's good. I want to be one. All right, we're going to train hard, but we're all focused. We're all strong. We're not seeing anybody get shot. There's no enemy. We don't see any brown people. This could be anywhere. Well, not in America, but All right, running to the camera just looks cool. Now he's back at home. He's a family man. My son, birthday. Serving, community. Probably a flood, some kind of disaster. All right, so he's rescuing some people. There's a young girl. He's not a racist. Now he's a dad, right? He's older. Again, there's there's diversity, but who cares, right? So far, it's female. There's black people, a black young female. I don't care that there's diversity here. It's not forced. It's actually pretty beautiful. It shows everybody working in harmony. Here's the difference between the Russian military. All right, we see his face. All right, we're connected to him. He is us. Home life, sports, hanging out with friends, romance, love, family, work, hard. Me, singular, the group, the unit. This is tough. We're strong. We work as a unit. We work together. It's me, it's us. Me, us. Me, us. It's hard. It's us. And we don't give a fuck. We are going to go and destroy whatever we have to destroy so we can save the homeland, so we can protect our family and our friends. All right, so there's a huge difference so far between American, which is really about service and generosity and helping people and just being a badass, right? This is all they're focused on is we just want hard mofos. That's all they care about. All right, now this is what you don't do. This is terrible. I don't want to ruin it for you. So this is the U.S. Army, different from the U.S. Marines, different from the Navy, most definitely not the Russian military. It's the opposite. All right, it's animated. What's going on here? Is this for 10-year-olds? The little girl's voice.
It begins in California with a little girl raised by two moms.
Okay, that's forced.
Although I had a fairly typical childhood,
Totally typical.
ballet, played violin, I also marched for equality.
She's courageous.
And defending freedom from an early age.
All right. Be yourself, right? So me. So far it's me.
One of my moms had an accident that left her paralyzed. Doctor said she might never walk again. But she tapped into my family's pride to get back
Pride.
on her feet. Eventually standing at the altar to marry my other mom. With
Aw.
powerful role models.
Powerful role models.
Top of my class. And then attended UC Davis, where I joined a
Well, I hung out with chicks and talked about really serious issues.
As graduation approached, I began feeling like I'd been handed so much in life. A sorority girl stereotype.
All right, guilt.
Sure, I'd spent my life around inspiring women. But what had I really achieved on my own? One of my sorority sisters was studying abroad in Italy.
On my own. What have I achieved? Look at these other achievements. I need an adventure.
My own challenge.
My own challenge.
And after
She can't climb a rope. Come on.
my inner strength, and maybe shatter some stereotypes.
All right, she's telling guys what to do. Look at her. She's a boss lady.
I'm U.S. Army Corporal Emma Malone.
All right.
And I answered my calling.
My calling. It's about me, guys. Everything in here is about me. Everything in that ad is about self, me, what I can do, how I can get status by getting up in front of a room, in front of a map that looks fancy, and people looking at me and listening to what I have to say. And then look at this other, look at this right here. So she's clearly a white chick, right? She looks pretty dark right there, though. They went so far out of their way to make sure everybody in here was diverse. If everyone's dark, there's no diversity, right? You ever hear the phrase, and it's a new like corporate speak thing, where like, oh, you're gonna love him, he's so diverse. And what they mean is he's black. It's kind of gross. And especially like when you're casting, and I shoot, I started this whole thing and I didn't tell you anything about myself. I'm more interested in this, doesn't matter. I shoot commercials, I'm a director of photography, I do ads and stuff like that. Sometimes I'm in these casting calls and they're like, oh, we can't use her because she's white. They literally just say she's white. And they say, send us someone of color. That's it. They don't care if they can act. They don't care anything about it. They just send us someone of color. That's all it is. That is the most offensive thing in the world. If you get a job basically because of the color of your skin, I do not feel proud of that. Yeah, okay. Point taken. Absolutely. Yeah, but if the case is generic, though, it's not really the point, right? Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. All right, cool. So speaking to a hidden audience, this is some NPR clips. So
that get thrown around as we try to grapple with the current state of politics right now. We hear a lot about white evangelicals. We hear about white supremacy. We hear about conservative Christians. How do we distinguish between all these different things? And is Christian nationalism the same thing? Is it a synonym?
Is it a synonym? So this is the 1A show, all right, First Amendment, and they're talking about all the most important issues of the day. The host maintains an air of non-judgment, but lumps them all together, right? So she's asking a question: white evangelicals, white supremacy, conservative Christians, are they different or not? Right? So important, the white supremacy is placed in the middle of the group to ensure the mingling of the terms. Guarantee they're not viewed as opposed. So white evangelicals, white supremacy, conservative Christians, right? We have to make sure that they're connected in the middle, that there's a link. Normally you'd be like, all right, white evangelicals, conservatives, and white supremacy, to make sure that we're not sure if there's a connection between the two. But when you mingle them all together and you stir the pot, you're basically guaranteeing that the person who's listening is already confused as to whether these things are the same.
Infrastructure. A key way to describe the movement is actually in terms of its political reach. It now completely dominates the Republican Party, and in fact, its allied politicians are able to dominate many state legislatures. Its leadership has stacked the Supreme Court with justices favorable to its agenda. So it's a leadership-led movement whose organizational infrastructure serves to mobilize and often manipulate a large subsection of the American public to vote a certain way, to vote for political candidates that the movement leaders favor, and thereby to sort of concentrate power in the hands of a new elite.
So often we hear these terms exactly discussed by leftists, where they talk about stacking the Supreme Court, mobilizing the vote, getting people who are their core voters to get out there, get motivated. But when it's used in the opposite context, it's an evil thing. It's not just bad, it's outright evil. So they're using negative connotation words like mobilize and manipulate. Right? They're very clearly insinuating that the message of the right is manipulation, that they're mobilizing their base. Now, I'm a Christian. I have not heard of Christian nationalism. I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know we were all racists and that we were going to subvert all of the state governments and that we were part of the secret club and that we're going to be stacking the Supreme Court to make sure that everything I wanted in life, which is female subjugation, would be a guarantee. So most people are led by their emotions, and I encourage you to read Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind. At least the first part of the book, the first third, is essential reading. The rest of the book, is kind of like more into the weeds. The end of it's pretty boring, actually. And he talks about the elephant and the rider, which is where we are led by our emotions, which is the elephant. And the rider is the front of our brain, which helps us to rationalize and reason and find the end goal of where we're trying to go. But first, we're led by the emotion, then we find the rationale to get there. So we already have the biases. We only need the justification to act on them. This quote is abridged.
Also recognized as white supremacist organizations. Anti-Semitic. What is the relationship here between Christian nationalism and the idea of white supremacy?
So we can look historically at one of the most well-known white supremacist groups and notorious groups, the Ku Klux Klan. And I'll quote one of the things that William Simmons, the leader of that group, said in a New York Times article in 1922. He said the Klan admits membership to none but, quote, native-born white Gentile Protestant Americans whose statement of principles was a restoration of the fundamental principles of American democracy, get this, as embodied in the Constitution of the United States, an organization whose code of conduct was Christianity. So right there, from the leader of the Klan in the Jim Crow era, you get this connection between Christianity and nation and this particular view of who really counts as an American and what the vision for the nation should be.
So like there's things in there that usually they like democracy and constitution. They like those things only when mentioned in the context which they're for. Earlier in this show they talked about, is there any part of the Constitution that they like? So they talk about how the Bill of Amendments is like antithetical to Christian nationalists because it allows the freedoms and rights to people that they don't like. But then later on, they actually play a clip talking about the KKK and how they were really pro-constitution and democracy, but it was their kind. Right? So they don't differentiate between the two. They're for it when they're for it. They're against it when they're against it. They're against it when people that they don't like use the methods that may actually end up putting them out. And look at the mixing, right? Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, white supremacists, anti-Semitics, Christianity, KKK? Yes, KKK.
They're not just using the tools of democratic and political culture. They're using the sort of tools of autocracy with all the voter suppression and the like to change the culture. But we can use the features of democratic political culture, but we invest in those features.
So positive words, negative words, right? Us versus them, negative association, autocracy, and suppression, positive association, invest, tools, features, right? It's great when we do it. It's evil when they do it. And as long as you make sure that when they are getting out the vote, that they're mobilizing in a military faction, now it's scary. It adds some urgency to it. But when we do it, it's great. It's a feature, and we invest in it. Investing is good. It's what smart people do. We're almost done here.
Which resistance, Andrew, is there among American Christians to the Christian nationalism ideology?
Well, right now, I think broadly when we survey the American public, there isn't much.
Not much.
The number of Americans, but especially white Christians, who we call rejectors or resistors of Christian nationalism, is right around 25%. And so they're a minority.
25% of Christians are okay.
There are Christians that do oppose it, but they're vastly outnumbered by accommodators and ambassadors. So when we look at white Christians as a whole, about 33% of them are ambassadors, those strong true believers, and about 35% are accommodators. But when we look at white evangelicals particularly, it's about 8 and 10 are either accommodators and ambassadors. And so there isn't much resistance right now. And so when we survey the American public, we see it is there, but it is not overwhelming by any stretch.
So I don't know if you heard it on the speaker there. When he says 8 and 10 white Christians, she goes, oof. Just to make sure that you understand, this is dire. This is really dramatic and bad. So 8 and 10 Christians are evil or evil enabling. So basically the goal here, like what is the goal? It's to fracture a church community. We are trying to make sure that we're sowing some kind of distrust amongst your fellow parishioners. If you go to church and you are a Christian listening to this, then you're trying to make sure that you instill some kind of doubt, self-doubt, guilt, or suspicion about the people in your life. And if you meet someone who says and self-identifies as a Christian, you're already going to be thinking about this clip that you heard and thinking, oh, are you one of those?
Yeah, I think, really to think about the threat of Christian nationalism to democracy in the U.S. is both
It's a threat.
and long game. I think the short game is there are steps being taken right now to roll back access to voting and voting rights in many different states. And so Americans have to respond right now.
Right now. You have to respond.
They essentially won't need an insurrection next time because the outcome will be decided. And so we have to make sure that all Americans, no matter their race, ethnicity, religious, minority, or secular, gender, sexuality, anything like that, have access to the vote. But I do think the long game does involve changing of hearts and minds, but that takes so long, as Catherine pointed out. But we have to be involved in that work as well. And
all right, so we could try arguments. We could, but that takes too long. All right, so we need to make sure that we get this through quickly. And we already mentioned the things that they're going to do, so let's just beat them to it. All right, let's just make sure we win the election so we can stack the Supreme Court and guarantee that they don't get any of their agenda through. I mean, what is this actually about? I mean, this reminds me of the climate change hysteria, right? It's going to happen right now. It's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen in 2 weeks. If you don't act on this today and you don't start going out and knifing people's tires, then we're basically screwed, all of us. And it's a reasonable tone, but it's serious and alarmed. Every person on this show is a professional propagandist, by the definition in which I gave you earlier. And I only listen to NPR about maybe 4 minutes a month. This was the first thing I heard. All right, so I turn it on once in a while. This is what I heard. It made me laugh, guffaw out loud in the car. My wife was there. She can attest to it. I went home and downloaded the podcast to make sure I can pull clips out of it. Every single show is a masterful piece of propaganda because they are all experts at it. The only people they have on the show are experts in propaganda. It makes sure that the megaphone is nice and loud. You hear all the consensus being created. There's no question in your mind, this is a threat. So who's actually being spoken to? So I pulled this yesterday. This is as of yesterday, the Real Clear Politics 22 generic congressional vote, which generic means would you vote for Republican or a Democrat, regardless of who's on the ballot. It's razor thin. It's Republicans plus 0.9. So the people listening to this show, I don't think there's a whole lot of like Republicans, but there's a lot of independents. There's a lot of right-leaning Democrats, people who may actually get carved off of their base. So the election polls are extremely close, and they're trying to make sure that the dissatisfied moderates, the dissatisfied independents, right-leaning Democrats don't get uppity and declare some kind of independence from the two-party system. So not only are you, not informed if you vote Republican, and again, I don't care. I'm a libertarian. I'm an anarchist. I obviously don't think you should vote Republican. I'm just telling you as I see it. This is what's happening. So if you vote for them, for the right wing, they're not just racists, they're religious zealots. You're a bad person if you give them your vote. Anyone remember this commercial? Run. Run, there's a racist. Of course, all the kids of color in the neighborhood know each other and they're all in the same street. Oh, well, don't worry, son, the racist won't win.
Is this what Donald Trump and Ed
Oof. Reject hate, guys. It's comical when you put it all in a reel, right? Like when you watch them one after another and I'm explaining, like, here's what's happening when you watch it. Just like, this is ridiculous. Do they think this works? It does, though. All right, we're going to talk about some art really quick, and then I got to wrap up. I know I'm probably over time, right? This is terrible. I'm sorry. All right.
So good and really long.
I'm sorry. I love this stuff. All right, art is propaganda. I saw this a few weeks ago. It's the NRA Children's Museum, created by a dad of a child killed in Parkland, Florida shooting, made of 52 empty school buses. The cities and the dates are on the roof of the buses, and they drove it by Senator Ted Cruz's house because he did it. This is the installation, just the photo of it. Remember, it's called the NRA Children's Museum. This is a close-up. All right, so Canoga Park, 5822, Montgomery, 622. I zoomed in on randomly this part of the image and saw, oh, there's names there. Let me actually go Google or search those things. I don't endorse Google. And see what they actually were, because this is a lot of shootings. That's a lot of dead children, okay? All right, so in the Canoga Park shooting, 3 men hospitalized, nobody died. It was on a sidewalk in a housing development. Then the Harrison Township was the other one, and that's Dayton, Ohio. And 2 people taken to the hospital after shooting early Wednesday morning, 1:40 a.m., again on the sidewalk. Nobody died. So 2 shootings after midnight on city streets, no schools, no children, no deaths. That was at random. I'm sure that there's a number of those that were school shootings. I'm sadly certain of that. But I'm also certain that most of it's bullshit. But the efficacy of art as propaganda is tops. It cannot be overstated. You hit them in the place where they are emotionally feeling it, and you're so sad by what you saw that you can't fact check it. If you do, you're a dick, frankly. Who fact checks school shootings? Like, what am I, Alex Jones? Like, let's see. So a creative imagery sends messages without using words, and the words are usually actually the problem. This is the last 2 slides. Deal effectively with rumors and suspicions, attempting to stop them at their source, counteracting them promptly with correct or more complete information. What does that sound like? A fact check? Yeah, it's a fact check. All right, straight out of his book. Just deal with it with the right, responsible, smart adults, and the kind of stuff that we're talking about won't be a problem. So, all right, that's my talk, and thank you for listening.
Questions? Any questions? Try and keep it relatively short. Anyone in the back there? Andy? Or actually, John.
I was wondering, is there any way that we could utilize this because it seems like one reason why we're not winning as the libertarians is that we can't get our voice out. Yeah. And the right and the left, more so the left, use this amazing and they win a lot. Could you see that we can actually do this in more of a truth-wise, but in the same tactic ways?
Yeah, the answer is yes. The difficulty in it is that the money is a huge aspect, and like I talked about Invisible Children and Coney 2012, I don't know what strings were pulled to get 100 million views in 6 days, but they did it. They got it on Oprah, for God's sake. So the high profile aspect of it is super important. And as I mentioned, the influencer angle of it, it's like, yeah, there are some really cool, really smart influencers in the Libertarian Party, and they're growing in popularity all the time, but they have to do it at such a clawing pace. So the ability to blast something via the megaphone is really limited because we don't have control over those outlets because they make sure that the opposing voice isn't heard. And that is why the beauty of the Ron Paul campaign was so amazing, because it was people at a grassroots level creating a megaphone on their own. They had the, drives on the highway with the banners, the overpass banners, internet memes, like the taking over the polls to make sure that he was always like the favored candidate. So the organization is really what makes it possible. And yes, you can use propaganda for good. Like I said in the very beginning, you can persuade someone to take care of themselves, and that's a good use of it. It's persuasion. It can be used for good, but the ability to put yourself in the headspace to be manipulative, which is what's effective in the short term, it's a fast-growing, rapid result that dies off quickly, but they have the ability to keep doing it, like it's a hit of cocaine, right? So we don't have that ability because we're not evil. I'm not, and I have a hard time being able to write propagandistic material that manipulates people to do something that I know they don't want to do. That's hard. It's hard to do, and it means that someone is blatantly evil and sociopathic to be able to sit down and write something for a campaign that they know is not going to carry through on the things that they say. It's a really hard answer. I can't say yes fully. There is a yes, but it's very difficult. Yeah.
All right. So as someone who is old enough to remember not only actual cigarette commercials on television, but a world in which there were 3 news sources, and you knew that they were telling you the truth because they all said the same thing.
Right.
And I know we don't live in this world anymore. Now, while the NPCs will always be NPCs, I feel like there's a lot of hope in that the ability of what's sometimes called the cathedral to manage the narrative in these terms is disintegrating.
Right.
Now, I'm hoping that, unlike the first Reformation, we don't have 130 years of war and chaos. But what are your thoughts on that idea that it's changing?
What specifically? The
that
changing?
it's that they've that the previous people have lost the ability to control the narrative the way they have.
Well, I think they know that, and that's why you see a fracturing of it. So you see them divesting the authority from CNN and then investing it into much smaller voices on YouTube and going through social media because they know that's where people go. So, it could be the voices on TikTok or something like that, right? And that's why you'll see propaganda from every outlet now. And then, again, like I said, people don't actually study advertising or propaganda anymore, or for that matter, good art. And that's why you see so much terrible stuff out there, because people just absorb it through the air, and they know that this is what gets attention and this is what gets social approval. So they carry on the megaphone for their leaders, their masters, who are manipulating them to repeat the same slogans in their own way, because they know if they do it, they get likes and follows.
Well, thank you. Thank you for such a good talk.
Thank you.
I was thinking in similar lines with the collapse of the traditional media and the rise of social media and the echo chambers that has increased. I think that content matters. One of the very good things that you did was talk about yourself being a dick for researching the instances on the bus. I think those are the kind of things that create...
I was not saying that, sir.
That's okay, I will. I'm your friend. I
I'm
promote
joking.
too, believe me. But I think those are the kind of content creations that we're seeing more of that is filtering into the population. And I think that if we are going to talk independence, we have to allow people to uptake the information because their biases are involved. But my question would be, if the propaganda aspect or the repetitive aspect of saying the same thing over and over again works, then why wouldn't we use that?
Oh, no, we should. Yeah, I mean, we should. And I think that's why you're also seeing... I saw a tweet yesterday where the person was saying, are you tired of getting trolled by gun owners or gun advocates because you don't know anything about guns? Well, here's a thread for you to get you up to speed, and then promptly wrote things that were incorrect about guns. And so it's getting to them in such of it's in their head in a big way. So things taxation is theft, which is a really quick, easy You know, it's a meme. Yeah, it's a slogan. Again, you know, we throw it out there and it makes people think about it. And it's a really good one, actually. We have a lot of slogans that are not good. That one I think is like to the point and really like makes you think about it. You're like, is it? No, I have to ask questions, you know? So yes, repetition is really important, but the thing is that it has to be succinct. And the problem with libertarians is that they are not at all succinct. So memes are great, but like, you know, like the leftists put up a meme and it's like one sentence and requires like 6 paragraphs. You've already lost. Nobody cares. When you talk to people, that's why I don't engage in social media. I do not engage on social media with people. I don't, because it's absolutely useless for what I want to accomplish. And I think that, like, you know, the Mises Caucus shitposting and stuff like that is good because it mocks openly the people who claim to have the power, and we have blue check marks on our names, so that's great. Go ahead and get them. But people in my neighborhood or my friends, you know, I find ways to talk to them in ways that impact their lives directly to show that I care about them, not just in a way that's like, you know, yeah, defund the Park Service because, you know, fuck the wildlife. That's not the reason.
At the very beginning of your speech, you talked about how you're a anarcho-capitalist and how you don't do propaganda as a result. But then you said that propaganda doesn't necessarily need to be evil. And aren't there some really solid bases of anarcho-capitalism and libertarianism that should be propagandized? Like, do you want your money to be stolen? Do you want to support murdering people in other countries? Do you... fundamentally evil things like the crony capitalism and everything. So don't you think that there's a space for anarcho-capitalism and libertarianism within propagandism, and could we use it?
Yeah, 100, absolutely, 100%. I'm not a propagandist. That's not my job. I don't get paid to write ads for, you know, campaigns and stuff like that. I didn't study it. I never worked for the government. I never worked for a big ad firm or PR firm. So I can't claim to you know, be one or anything like that. It's kind of more of a joke when people refer to me in that way. I'm highly interested in the topic, really. And I think, yes, it can be used. Of course it can be used. It should be used. If we don't use it, we lose, flat out. The thing is that you have to identify who your audience is. Just like that NPR clip, they were identifying who their audience was specifically. They weren't talking to their base. Their base is already won over. Like, they're not educating about anything they haven't heard before or already think. You know, they're already in on the Handmaid's Tale vision of, you know, where America's going because of the ultra, you know, idealistic Supreme Court. Like, they already believe that. So you have to identify who the silent group is that is not speaking up. And I think that, like in Colorado, for example, we have a really large group, probably a vast majority of people who are extremely moderate, don't like to rock the boat, and they don't like to get into disagreements and arguments with their neighbors. They like to go along with what's popular just to avoid conflict. When you're dealing with those people, you have to speak to them quietly, where they are, in a way that doesn't make you seem crazy. That's my stepson. Just unplug that.
I know you're a
Yes, sir.
filmmaker, so I hope it's not impolite to bring up competition.
No.
I'd like to hear any thoughts you have on the work of Adam Curtis.
I am not familiar, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Oh my goodness, he did a multi-part documentary on Bernays.
Oh, okay.
And
I'm sure it was great.
It's excellent, and
What's it called?
it's called The Century of the Self.
I'll happily watch it.
I highly recommend it.
Where did you see it? What was the outlet?
I think I actually watched it on YouTube, but in
Okay.
terms of its origins, I'm not sure. He's a British documentary guy, and he's gotten more and more bold
Okay.
through the years. I consider his recent works really excellent. He puts a lot of attention to propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
He's also a consummate propagandist himself, and he does
Sounds
not
great.
he does not hide what he does, but he leaves me thinking. And
Edwin Curtis?
no, Adam
Curtis.
Adam Curtis.
All right, I'll check it out.
So
Sure.
as a single movie length work, I recommend Bitter Lake. Bitter Lake is my favorite movie of his. He's done a number. And his most recent documentary series is called Can't Get You Out of My Head. And it is available on YouTube, unfortunately only with Portuguese subtitles, but fabulous, really worth watching.
Sounds great. Thank you for adding that.
You use the metaphor that sometimes the propaganda is like taking a hit of cocaine.
Yeah.
Do you think there comes a point where people are overly propagandized to the point where you just burn them completely out and they become useless?
Yeah. And that's why you see them shift gears. That's why whenever like a story is burned out, they kick it out and they just never return to it.
Yeah. But I'm talking more the customer that they're going to. Like if you shift stories enough times, you know.
No, my answer is the same. That's
okay.
Yeah, that's it. Like, so when you've burned someone out on a story, you can still win them back with something that's true.
Oh, okay. But you never hit a point where you burn them out so bad that nobody can propagandize them because they're just fried?
Nope. No.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely not. No. You can always go back to the well. Okay. You know, even when you dry a well, you leave it alone for a couple of years, you can come back to it, right? And there's some water back in there. Like, you can always manipulate someone again in a new way. You know, it's almost like, why does the stock market just keep bubbling? You know, we keep bubble all the way up and people are just like, yeah, buy houses, it's an ATM. And then all of a sudden, shit, it crashed again. I fell for it again. Like, they just keep coming back to it. And there's always a new character, right? Like, there's always a new threat. Like, okay, we overplayed the Trump thing. Now, whoever the next person is.
Two more questions.
Putin's price hike.
So you showed a lot of false inside a propaganda, but you did not mention one thing. Every propaganda has true inside it. Truth.
Truth.
Always, yes. And
that's right.
A lot of people see only truth, and they do not see that missing link between the truth which showed on the picture and the actions which propaganda try to make.
Right.
So, yeah, it's I would say it's a very important point in every kind of fraud, that always there is some kind of truth, like selling of Brooklyn Bridge. There is a Brooklyn Bridge, you can see it, but the action of selling it is a fraud. So it's always like that. So there is some kind of truth inside, but
it can't be a complete fabrication.
Yes,
if it's a complete fabrication, it'll be found out like, you know, the Covington Catholic story. It was 24 hours, right? And they were dead wrong. So there has to be something truth to it to keep it going. And that's why when they're dead wrong, they have to maybe pivot gears to be like, yeah, but he's a dick. You know, it's like, so the fallback is something really pathetic. And that's usually when they're cooked.
I don't necessarily have a question, more thinking out loud here. Throughout this walk through history of propaganda, it almost seems like it was a picture that was portrayed almost like a seesaw. Originally, the propaganda was so efficient because it was very centralized. There was only a few sources, and there wasn't that like proficiency of outlets to emanate it. And I think a really important factor to always take into consideration is demographics and generations. So like older generations, the boomers, those that are the largest viewers of Fox News and CNN today, were built in that system of the seesaw being really tilted towards these really centralized systems, and it almost seems like the seesaw is like falling to the other end now, where we're coming to the peak for humanity, for our existence, towards proficiency of outlets. Proficiency of outlets that we have now, and it almost seems like it's an opportunity for us to capitalize on as libertarians, that it's now, the pendulum always swings. We always go to the extremes, you know, and it almost seems like it's swinging back towards this side that the legacy systems, like we just had CNN Plus spend, what, $300 million, and it canceled in a month. And was so unsuccessful. It just seems like such a level of opportunity for us as libertarians, as autists, that, you know, use technology, that it's like, it almost seems like it's our time to shine right now.
You're right.
Or burn it to the ground. But unfortunately, using Alinsky, these are the frames that we're working with right now,
Yeah.
you know? And I don't have a question, but it's almost, you know, just like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, man. Yeah, the time is a really interesting one. You know, the technology, the ability to speak, to get your voice out there, and the burnout. You know, to go back to the burnout is true. The burnout's real, but you can't capitalize on burnout unless people see that there's some other option, right? Instead, you just have people opt out of the system. They stop voting. They're disenfranchised voters. You know, you end up just making people feel hopeless and that maybe actually is what's behind the violence in our society. Maybe it's behind the school shootings. Maybe it's behind all the, you know, people being shoved in front of a subway train. People feel hopeless. They feel desperate. They feel like there's no way out of this system. That could be something to reach out to explain why you feel this way, right? There's a lot of ways that you could take it, but it's going to take someone who's got that skill set in that area to reach the person which they're trying to reach.
That's our talk. Give it up for Gus.